I'm Vinnie Politan, the subject of my investigation, the Au Pair Affair murder trial. It's the story of a man accused of creating a sick, twisted plot to murder his wife so he could be with the much younger au pair. Here's the story. The affluent suburbs of Northern Virginia are now the stage for one of the most shocking trials in recent memory. Prosecutors say former IRS agent Brendan Banfield plotted an elaborate murder scheme to kill his wife, Christine Banfield, and a stranger, Joseph Ryan, in their Herndon home in February of 2023, so he could be with the family's live-in au pair, Juliana Peres. Jurors have heard how Banfield allegedly posed online under his wife's identity to lure Ryan for a sexual encounter involving a knife, then shot him and stabbed Christine, attempting to stage the scene as an intruder attack. The au pair pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Ryan's death and testified for the prosecution about the plan. Meanwhile, Banfield has taken the stand in his own defense, admitting to the affair, but denying any murder, calling the conspiracy claims absolutely crazy. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to say anything. You can take the fifth, but Brendan Banfield has not taken the fifth. He has decided to tell his story to the jury. Let's take a look at Brendan Banfield on the witness stand here. Now, we know the words are his story, but what is his body saying here? What is his body language telling this jury? What is it telling us about his story, about his version? That's our first question of the day. Take a look as we begin this investigation. What does Brendan Banfield's body language reveal? This is so significant, so important in a case that's all about a he said, she said credibility battle. Joining me to help us with this, she was in the courtroom to see this testimony, body language expert and host of the podcast In the Driver's Seat with Janine Driver. Janine Driver is here. Janine, great to see you. And this is another situation, that same courtroom where it was depth versus heard, all about credibility, and in body language, everything else was important. Same thing here, au pair versus IRS agent. Are you ready to take a look at some of this testimony?
Let's do it.
Or actually take another look at it, because you've seen it all. You were in the courtroom. Let's go here. This is a direct examination, and we're going to look at direct right now, talking about him approaching the house that morning before he goes in.
I guess it made me very anxious. I didn't know what was going on. I had concerns that this was going to be an affair, but I didn't know really I didn't really know what was going on at that point.
Okay. Did you think to call 911 at that point?
I didn't think that, it wasn't on my mind at this point that this was some type of violent or threatening encounter.
And what was your concern if there was going to be noise in the front area of your house?
I didn't know what was going on, if there was an affair going on. I didn't want to alert it at that point. I also thought about just getting the lunches for Valerie and Juliana that they were missing and leaving. That was also a thought.
All right, Janine, let's get into this. And off the top, I just wanted to ask you, why am I so uncomfortable as I listen to him?
You're uncomfortable because you're not seeing emotions. You're seeing logic. You're seeing the prefrontal cortex tell us a memorized script. When there is a high violent crime like this, Vinnie, and you at home, it's connected with trauma and emotions. We're not seeing it. And as a matter of fact, what body language are we going to analyze? There's not much happening here, body language-wise, right? He's looking at the jury off to his right-hand side. I was in the courtroom today, about 3 rows back, and I was sitting behind his father, actually, and his stepmother, watching their behavior. I was watching also the jurors. Not a lot body language happening. We saw him shake his head here. What I really want to focus on is what I just wrote down, so many notes just from this tiny clip. He said, I guess it made me very anxious. So, all right, Vinnie, I lost my mother 12 years ago, right? And if you said, what did it feel like when I lost my mom? I wouldn't say, I guess I was sad. No, I was devastated. I was gutted. So I guess we have a lot of this hedging language. I don't really know what. I don't think that it wasn't on my mind. He does a lot of start-stop sentences. And at that point, I wanted to bring up at that point, Vinnie, and you at home, because he said this, maybe over between yesterday and today, about 50 times at that point. And it's funny because if I was the prosecutor, one of the questions at one point was he didn't realize at first that there was also wounds on the other side of her neck. And he was asked by the defense attorney, did you help with the other side of the neck? And he said, no, not at that point. Now, if I was the prosecuting attorney, I would say, hey, earlier you said, let's bring back exactly what you said here, Brendan Banfield. You said not at that point. So at what point did you touch the other side? So this is a hot spot. At that point is called temporal distancing, and it doesn't prove deception, but it signals psychological distancing from the event, and this is narrating. So the reason you're feeling weird, Vinnie, and you at home, is it's narrating. It's like a camera operator or a director of a movie. And here's the deal. When someone grabs the microphone and they become Vinnie Politan reporting in on a crime, hey, it appears that this was happening. It looks like this was happening. Instead of actually telling us what happened, instead of being a normal person who is there. By the way, the only time he got excited and emotional at any point when he talked about the au pair actually shot the gun. And he got pretty excited there. I was like, oh, he does have a little emotion. He is absent of emotion. And I know I'm here with you for a little while, so I won't give it all away right now. But this is what's making you likely feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, just watching, something is off at dot, and I'm not, and it's like, I want to connect, but I can't connect with what he's doing. Let's take a listen to a little more here.
Vinnie. Sorry, I was just going to say, the whole beginning today was about the dog in the basement and the dog food spilled over. And that's called stacking the deck. When people are telling the truth, they'll do about 10 to 15% up front. Then the actual murder, the crime, the incident should be about 60%. And then we're looking for about 10 to 15% after. What liars do is they'll stack the deck. They do this, I call it smoke screening, about the dog, and the dog food tipped over. And that was weird. And the dog has a weird bark. And the dog, that was concerning because the dog's not usually in the basement. But when we get to the murder, we have all this hedging language. We have no emotion. But when we're talking about the dog, I mean, we talked about the dog this morning in court for a long time. Yeah. I wrote 4 pages on dog.
Yeah, and the day before it was about the QR code at McDonald's. Okay, let's get to on why he went upstairs, as Brendan Banfield explains that.
So what made you stop from your initial thought of leaving and getting the lunches and letting Juliana and Valerie go to the zoo?
I guess as my mind was kind of racing in this moment, the sound, I guess, sounded like it changed to me. Instead of what I thought was the sounds of sex, I thought that the impact sounds sounded forceful, and that Christine's moaning sounded painful and not pleasurable, and that the distance between the sound of the skin-on-skin contact sounded too far apart for sex, and I thought that maybe she was being hurt.
He talked a lot about skin-on-skin contact. By the way, the Joseph Ryan had all his clothes on. Just want to make a note of that. All right, what did we see in here in this part?
Right out of the gate, he takes this big sigh. Okay, here we go. He shakes his head no. Look at right here, Vinny, and you at home. He's shaking his head no through this whole entire part of the testimony. Again, we hear, I guess. The sound, I guess. And Christine's moaning sounded painful. He's talking like a robot. We saw this with Jussie Smollett, who staged a hate crime over in Chicago a couple of years back. When he was being interviewed, he said, I didn't have any doubt in my mind that that was them, regarding to the two guys that he hired to stage this hate crime. When we get this robotic language, lacking emotion, lacking connecting with any empathy, and he says, Christine, at what point, Vinny, maybe I missed it, and maybe you caught it, does he say, my wife? My wife is ownership. My wife is, we're connected. We don't have it here. We don't have, as a matter of fact, he even says it's my house. Even when he calls 911, this is my house. It's a lot of my, me. It is unbelievable. I took today 27 pages of notes. 27 pages. This is going to be a lot of social media from it. You got to have me on your podcast, okay? Let's get on.
I'll wait till the movie comes out. I'm waiting for the movie. I don't need to.
That's good.
You know, that when you said the my thing, I picked up on that yesterday when he talked about taking the au pair into my bedroom. Well, it was like our bedroom, right? Like my wife and mine, this is our bedroom. It's not my bedroom. Like you have
I'd like to bring something up there. I'd like to tell you something very interesting, Vinny. When he talks about the bedroom, even when he talks about going upstairs, he talks about opening the door with his foot, shutting the door. This is very interesting. In law enforcement, normal people do not talk about opening and shutting doors, right? The everyday person's like, I ran in, I heard my wife, I ran in, there was blood everywhere. We're not saying there was blood over here, and then I recognized there was blood over here. That is, I've never heard of any such thing like this. This is like the order of the wounds, right? He's trying to get ahead of it in case the questions come up. But here's what's interesting. Who talks about shutting doors and opening doors? People who are sneaking into other people's bedrooms. Now, this happens with child molesters. This happens with women and men who were molested as children, because what happened? The trauma happened when the door shut or when the light goes on. It also happens when a host dad has sex with his au pair from Brazil. So we'll hear that. Because if I said to you, Vinny, or you at home, I said, tell me what you did this morning. You would say, I got up, I brushed my teeth, took a quick shower, threw my clothes on, had some coffee, and went to work. At no point will you say, I got up, I opened my bedroom door. I then went into the bathroom and I opened the bathroom door. When people talk about opening doors or turning lights on or off, it indicates one thing to us in law enforcement, which is secrets happened in bedrooms.
All right, Janine Driver's staying with us. Coming up next, we continue to examine the question, what does Brendan Banfield's body language reveal?
Did you tell her to call 911 at that point?
No.
Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair. So he killed his wife and another man.
He was saying, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings on Court TV.
So it was just before she was arrested that you were fully in love with her?
Well, that's when we had an opportunity to actually have a bit of a relationship. With other points were obviously very separated. I mean, I was still working a lot. Christina was obviously still around, and I was spending a lot of time with her.
So when a defendant decides to testify, obviously they get to tell their story, and perhaps a rehearsed story with questions that they know are coming from their own attorney, but they sign up for cross-examination as well. Brendan Banfield on the stand today on cross. Take a look. Here he is. Is there any difference? Is there any change in his body language? We're still looking at the question of what does Brendan Banfield's body language reveal, and is it any different on cross? Body language expert Janine Driver still with us. Okay, let's show you some of the cross today. And we begin again, this is the moment he's walking up the stairs with his gun to see what's going on in the bedroom. Let's watch.
When you turned and saw Juliana had followed you, at that point in time, you're worried that bad things are happening, correct?
Yes, I am.
Did you tell her to call 911 at that point?
No, I was moving quickly towards the door.
Did you tell her to go back downstairs and get your daughter out of the house at that point?
I wasn't worried about Juliana at that point. I was worried about Christine.
Okay, and you weren't worried about your daughter at that point either then, right?
I don't think Valerie was on the top of my mind when I believed that Christine is being injured. And that was at the forefront of my mind.
All right, I'm listening to this guy. Unbelievable. Okay, what are you, is it any different here on cross? Does any of the way he speaks, the body language, yes. Does it change?
He's getting a little feisty there, wasn't he? Let's see. Number one, right there, eye blocking. So eye blocking is I don't want to share with you what really happened. So we see that longer eye close. We saw that with Scott Peterson. We saw it with Drew Peterson. And quite frankly, we saw it with Ted Bundy back in the day. He said, I was moving, quickly towards the door. And when he said that, he did a shoulder shrug. A shoulder shrug is uncertainty. I don't believe him. He is a terrible liar. I have a funny feeling he wanted to get himself on the stand because of his ego. And more importantly, as you were bringing up the clip coming back from the commercial break, he said the word obviously 2 times, which is interesting because then you came back and you said, obviously, the prosecuting attorney now gets to ask additional questions. When we use the word obvious is here, when it is obvious to mankind. So, Vinnie, for you to say, obviously, the defense gets to talk and then the prosecutor gets to talk and then they get another rebuttal. So, obviously, because we're watching Court TV with Vinnie Politan, for the love of God. So, it's common to mankind for the audience that's watching. Brendan, we weren't there. So to say, obviously, this happened, and then obviously, he said it 2 times within 15 seconds. What this is truthful people convey, Vinnie. Liars try to convince. And one of the ways liars try to convince is saying, obviously, and we have that here. This is the perfect case to be looking at with regard to statement analysis, created by a guy named Mark McGlish. He's written several books on it. He taught at FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And the FBI has looked at certain words that have very specific meaning. And why is this the perfect case? Because there's no body language. And occasionally he'll leak contempt. We do see some eye blocking, a little teeny shoulder shrug. Here's the big one. This is the smoking gun in body language, Vinnie. There are no illustrators and emblems, which are hand gestures that tell the story, right? Hey, someone came from behind, and he, at one point he's talking about, he hit me from behind. He hit me from behind, right? There's no movement. When someone experiences real trauma, they relive it when they tell the story. And so they're like, hey, I looked over here. I walked up the stairs. I went, and he was over here. This one's over here, and we don't have it here. Again, I know this wasn't a murder case, but Jussie Smollett, same thing. He said, I'm walking down the street and someone said, hey, and the attacker said, first of all, the attacker's not an attacker until after he attacks, right? So I knew that was rehearsed with Jussie Smollett. And guess what else? He never turns around. That's what we see here. There are no body language movements. Why? This is a story being told by the prefrontal cortex as if he's a reporter working over here for you guys at Court TV. When someone goes from being a normal person talking to a reporter, even his language is reported. It appears, it looked like, all this squishy. Basically, this language is as if he wasn't there. It's as if he's an observer, because I believe he is.
Wow. Let's listen to one more piece of the cross-examination here, talking about Joe Ryan stabbing his wife and then his conversation with his wife after she's been stabbed. Let's watch.
That is one moment when you see Joe Ryan stab Christine, correct?
Yes, and then downward after she went to the floor. So
okay, so you believe that's another stab?
I'm only positive of the 2.
Okay, so you've got 2. So there's 5 more. When did he stab her those other 5 times?
The knife is inside of her hair. I can't tell the movement. I can't tell how that is looking at that time. And I don't know exactly what happened before I arrived either.
Okay, well, she had to get 5 more wounds at some point. And you're telling us that when you get into the room, she's capable of speech, correct?
Yes.
Okay, she says a lot of stuff. She says that he's got a knife, right? Brendan, he's got a knife.
Yes.
She says that. And she says at one point that she wants you to put more pressure on her neck, correct?
Yeah, she told me to put my hand there, and then she put more pressure on my hand.
And then at one point, she tells you she can't see, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And all of this talking is happening with what at that point in time has to be all 7 of the wounds in her neck, correct?
Yes.
All right, Janine, we have about a minute to wrap this up. What are your thoughts here?
All right, 2 things big. 1, a knife is inside of her hair. Is current tense, not past, was. And so we saw that quite a bit today. We heard that the tense is changing. Now, the tense can change, Vinny, and you at home, if someone is telling a highly emotional story and they're jumping all over the place, and then he came at me, and that's the only time. Otherwise, it's constructing a story here. It's interesting because he's experiencing no emotions. I was watching the jury, Vinny. Guess what? Some of them were bored out of their mind. A couple had their arms crossed. Lots of them, about 80% were off to their side. They are experiencing no emotions. Why? Because he's not showing emotion. But know what he said, Brendan Banfield? He said, my finger went into the wound. My finger literally went right in. They didn't bite. I watched the jury. No one was believing it.
Wow.
So then he says it 2 more times. I think this is his opportunity. He's trying to fish for some emotions. Why? We have mirror neurons. And if you can experience my pain, you might think I didn't do it. And it's
Janine
not
Driver,
happening.
great to have you on the program.
Nice to see you.
Coming up, how does Brendan Banfield's testimony compare to the au pairs? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the au pair affair murder trial. Brendan Banfield accused of setting his wife up to be raped before he murdered her. Those are the allegations. All of this so he could be with the au pair. Here's the story. In a Fairfax County courtroom, the fallout from a brutal double homicide is playing out under the public eye. Brendan Banfield stands accused of murdering his wife, Christine, and a 39-year-old man named Joseph Ryan inside the family home in February of 2023 in what prosecutors call a calculated plot tied to his affair with their au pair, Juliana Magalhães. Jurors have heard allegations that Banfield and Magalhães crafted a false online persona for Christine on a fetish website to lure Ryan for a staged encounter. Then they executed their plan. Magalhães, who pleaded guilty to manslaughter, testified for the prosecution, describing how Banfield allegedly shot Ryan and stabbed his wife, Christine. On the stand himself, Banfield admitted to the affair with the au pair and others, but denied any murderous plot, insisting there was no plan to kill his wife. A jury must now decide who to believe. 4 people were in that bedroom. 2 are dead. 2 got indicted, and both of them took the stand in this trial. Brendan Banfield on the left, the au pair on the right. 2 versions of what they say happened in the buildup to the killings and inside the room that day. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. How does Brendan Banfield's testimony compare to the au pairs? Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, let's go through some of the pieces of this story that both testified to. Let's start first with the most important part, which is Christine being stabbed. What did Brendan and the au pair say about that?
Well, Vinnie, of course, Brendan took the stand in his own defense, and Vinnie, under direct, he told the court that he came home to see Joseph Ryan pressing a knife to his wife Christine's neck. Take a listen to this.
You saw a knife there. What were you thinking in terms of Joe Ryan with a knife to Christine's neck?
I was extremely terrified. I don't know that I've ever been more panicked in my life. Christine kind of yelled or moaned, or both. I thought that she was being injured, being stabbed.
Did you see him stab her?
It appeared that he was putting forward movement towards, or it seemed that he was putting forward movement towards with the knife, but I couldn't see Christine's neck or face really at that point. Her hair was in the way. It appeared that he did a very forceful stab towards Christine.
You couldn't see whether or not he had stabbed her in the neck or made contact with the neck?
Correct.
Okay. And that she had made some sort of a sound and pulled away?
Yes.
All right, so that's his story, but the au pair says it didn't go down that way. Juliana told the court that it was actually Brendan that stabbed Christine. Take a listen to this.
When I was bringing him the towel, he got on top of her, and that's when I first saw him stabbing her with a knife.
Where in her body was he stabbing her?
Her neck.
And were you able to see whether or not he stabbed her one time or more than one time?
I was able to see him stabbing her.
So conflicting stories there, Vinnie, but the one constant, Christine was stabbed brutally to death.
All right, Cody's going to stand by because we've got another issue to get to in this segment. But joining me right now, New Jersey criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III, and criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. Great to have you both here. All right, Al, what do you think of the two versions of the stabbing? Because this is a battle of credibility. Which one makes more sense?
Well, you know, Vin, I mean, I got to give myself credit because as I did on the Tangent podcast, I spoke about the fact that he was going to make up a story that said they were both involved in affairs, that she liked to be rough, she liked to have BDSM and things along those lines, and he went down that path. The question comes down as to whether or not he was, convincing on the stand. I don't think he was, but not necessarily. I don't think that the au pair was convincing either with regards to Save. I mean, she. Are you seeing
it as a wash? The two versions of the actual stabbing. Okay. Mario.
I'm seeing it as a wash. Absolutely.
Mario.
So I kind of agree with Al. I think that there were inconsistencies on both. The au pair comes into it, with a plea agreement, which is always a problem for a prosecutor. I'm a former prosecutor, now defense attorney. So, plea agreements are always a problem. The Netflix issue was also a problem. But, his testimony, I agree with Janine Driver in your last segment. He's kind of like a robot up there. There's no emotions. He's talking about a person who's stabbing his wife, and he's emotionless. She showed a lot more emotion than he did, than he did at any time during his testimony. So I do think it's a wash. I think that they equal out, but the testimony kind of is corroborated.
All right, let's take a look at another issue. We'll bring back in Cody. Cody, what did Brendan and the au pair say about Juliana shooting Joseph Ryan?
Well, Vinnie, both Brendan and Juliana had similar stories about who actually shot Joseph Ryan. Take a listen to both of them right here.
Christine told me that she was bleeding out and that she was sorry and that she loved me. It was at this point that there was another shot. And I looked up and I saw that Juliana had my other firearm. And I was stunned that Juliana had shot almost simultaneously. Joe Ryan struck me in my shoulder.
After you felt that, was that when Juliana shot?
To me, those all seemed to be within the same second.
I had the gun with me that morning, and I just start telling him, he's moving, he's behind you, and that's when I fired the shot too.
That's when you, could you say that again?
I fired.
Who'd you hit?
Joe.
So, Vinnie, both of them agreeing that Juliana was the one who shot Joseph Ryan, but Juliana saying she was yelling, "Oh, he's behind you." Brendan saying that he was stunned that she pulled the trigger. Either way, it ended in Joseph Ryan's death.
Yeah, let's bring back in our guests, Al Wunsch, Mario Gallucci. All right, Al, these two competing versions. One, he's shocked. The other one, she's warning him about Joe Ryan behind him. What do you think? What do you make of that? What do you think the jury will do with that?
Well, actually, I thought that the prosecution did a good job on saying, how did she get the gun? How did she know that the combination to your safe and have the presence of mind to be able to put in that combination and take the gun out and then shoot this guy? That didn't make a lot of sense to me, because anyone who has a gun safe like I have, you would never, ever, ever disclose that, especially to an au pair in your household. So I thought that, it was a very interesting scenario with regards to how she got the gun in the first place. Nothing's been explained as to that. He wasn't able to explain it, and it really wasn't. They didn't really question her about that to the extent that they did him. So I think it was a very, very weird story with regards to same.
Mario, what do you think of the two versions of the shooting there?
So, look, if it's a wash, if we both think it's a wash, the jury's going to look at what the evidence corroborates. And the blood evidence in this case corroborates the au pair's story. And that's just plain and simple. And the addition of the alibi being shot out as a rebuttal witness is definitely not going to be helpful to Mr. Banfield. He wasn't at a meeting. He wasn't supposed to be at a meeting. So, his story is not corroborated. And most of her story is corroborated by the other physical evidence in the case. So, and when she's talking about the shooting, she's emotional about it. Yeah. He was a robot. Yeah. She was not.
Much different. All right, big thanks, Al Wunsch. Appreciate it. Mario's going to stick around for a second. Coming up next, we continue to examine the question: how does Brendan Banfield's testimony compare to the au pairs?
Did you love your wife?
Very much.
Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair, so he killed his wife and another man.
He was saying, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings on Court TV.
Did you ever create any sort of a plan with Juliana?
No, there was no plan.
So he didn't want to get divorced. Did he tell you what he wanted to do?
Yes.
What did he say?
He mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
Two witnesses that prosecutors believe one is telling the truth, the other is lying, the defense, vice versa. It's the au pair versus the IRS agent, the husband, the father, the boss, the lover, right? Who is the jury going to believe? And we're discussing how the testimony from the au pair compares to Brendan Banfield's. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, Cody, what do Brendan and the au pair say about the relationship between Brendan and his wife, Christine?
Well, Vinnie, first, Brendan described the relationship between him and his wife as sort of them being attached at the hip, almost like a fairy tale, but he did admit to having previous affairs, plural. Take a listen.
How would you characterize your relationship with Christine?
For the most part, we were pretty inseparable. We were together the entire time. We didn't break up at any point. We were from college to our first jobs after college, to buying our first house together, to marriage, to getting a dog and a second dog, and then moving down here. We were always together.
Did you love your wife?
Very much.
Did you want to continue your marriage with your wife?
Yes, I have had affairs previously, and that there's nothing that changes in mine and Christine's relationship.
All right, Vinny, so the au pair told a different story, saying that Brendan thought Christine didn't care about him at all, but she said that Brendan said divorce was not an option. Take a listen to this.
Did he ever talk about his relationship with his wife, Christine Banfield?
Sometimes it would come up in our conversation and he would talk about it.
And what did he say?
He used to say that she didn't seem to care about where he was, what he was doing. She didn't seem to care about him at all. And that she was helpless and just lazy. He basically said divorce was not an option.
Did he say why?
Money was involved.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Money.
Okay, anything else?
Money was involved and Valerie's custody too.
So he didn't want to get divorced. Did he tell you what he wanted to do?
Yes.
What did he say?
He mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
And you said he mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty big bombshell there, Vinny, a plan to get rid of Christine. And if the prosecution is right, it's the plan that led to where we are right now.
Yeah, there's a big difference in the interpretation of this relationship. Cody Thomas, thanks so much. All right, let's bring in our guest. Joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us, and still with us, criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. Okay, Chris, what do you think of the differing descriptions of the relationship between Brendan and his wife, Christine?
You know, Vinny, I thought adding the dogs into the conversation was really powerful. Evident of the fact that this guy goes on to tell a jury that, you know, hey, we've got this pristine relationship. We're pretty inseparable. We've been together all these years. We've had these dogs together. But, oh, by the way, I've had all of these other affairs. That's really not how you want to kick it off on the stand in front of the jury when you're on trial.
Mario, what do you think was the actual state of the affair? What is the jury going to take away from this? Which version do you think makes more sense?
Well, the her version makes more sense, and I get a kick out of the fact that he mentions that they had two dogs together, and he forgets to mention that they had a daughter together. I thought that was a big deal. Look, his chain of events doesn't make any sense. I mean, they were college sweethearts. They were, paired at the hip. They got two dogs together. He forgets that they had a daughter together, and yet he's having an affair with the au pair. He admits that he had multiple affairs. This guy is, he's all over the place here. And I just don't find him to be believable at all. She's got nothing to lose here. I mean, she's already got a plea deal in place. The evidence corroborates just about everything she says. And, he's fighting for his life up there, and I don't think he's doing a very good job of it.
So, Chris, one of the things that he did say during the course of his testimony was that at the moment the au pair is saying that he has a plan to kill his wife is only 6 to 8 weeks into their physical relationship, because she had been working there for a while, but he said, yeah, I was busy. But then, when I was around the house and then things happened, she hit on me, she seduced me, yada, yada, yada. what are your thoughts about, does that sound plausible that Brendan, within 6 to 8 weeks of engaging in this physical relationship with the au pair, would be talking to her about a plot to murder Christine?
Well, you know, if he's driven, you know, purely by this fantasy of, you know, sexual gratification, because I think that's an underlining piece of this puzzle here, Vinny, right? Because if, in fact, he had engaged her that quickly and then shifted it to, okay, by the way, we have to, you know, put some other things into motion, you know, I wonder if there's going to be more testimony about what she was thinking other than, you know, hey, we're going to put this plot together and take out my wife. Is she thinking, well, does that mean me down the road? So I could see that as a possibility, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and the truth, Mario, that the jury knows is that they did end up together in the marital bedroom. There were photos like on the nightstand, along with some other stuff on the nightstand that I don't want to talk about. But at the end of the day, he can say that was so quick, but at the end of the day, he's with her. And by the way, he was with her in New York for quite some time, ringing in the new year. We're looking at those photos in the bathtub with his hand on her thigh, in the limo, all of it. Like, to me, it's not far-fetched because it actually happened.
Absolutely happened. It absolutely occurred between the two of them. I mean, this was a full-blown affair to the point where, you know, he contrived a story to try to move on with her. And he goes to this elaborate plan of how he's going to do it. And like I've been saying, most of the evidence corroborates her story. And that's what the prosecution is looking for. Look, they gave her a deal. I mean, she's getting time served on a murder case. That's a big deal.
Oh, it's a huge deal.
And she's got a Netflix thing. Yeah. And she's got this, perhaps she's got this Netflix deal out there also. But forget all that. When in summations tomorrow, I believe you're going to hear the prosecution lay out the fact that you think whatever you want about this girl, but everything she said is corroborated by the evidence that we put before you. And I'm going to go back to it. The IRS agent, Thomas Smith, you know, corroborates he's not an alibi. He's not a very good alibi. I mean, he blows the whole thing out of the water as a rebuttal witness.
We have about 25 seconds left here, Chris. Are you shocked that a member of law enforcement had an alleged plan like this man did?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that they got him out of the business and he's on trial allegedly for this crime.
All right, big thanks to our guest, Chris McDonough, The Interview Room. It is amazing. Make sure you watch it on YouTube. Mario Gallucci, great work in the courtroom. Great work on television. We're going to have you on more often. This is amazing. All right, as sick as it is, the only story here that makes sense to me, in light of the facts that we know, is that Brendan Banfield planned and plotted this whole thing. I just don't believe Christine was into knife play and Joe Ryan was a psychopathic killer who's going online creating a digital trail to find his victim. I think this was a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else, but it doesn't matter what I think. The question is, what does the jury think? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.